So, hello, I'm here today with Cheryl Hawkins, who used to be a psychiatrist but now works in mental health training. So, it's good to have you with me here today, Cheryl.
Thank you.
To start off, do you want to tell me a little bit about your background with being a psychiatrist and what that was like for you?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in mental health, and I kind of went into psychiatry as soon as I could after completing my kind of core training in as being a doctor. So I went to medical school and did my house jobs, then got straight into psychiatry, and I've worked in the NHS on and off for about 12 years doing my training, doing my exams and everything to be a psychiatrist. And I loved working in psychiatry.
So it seems like you've always had that interest in mental health and that's continued with you.
Yeah.
What led you to go from psychiatry into leaving being a psychiatrist and doing the mental health training?
Well, it was my own mental health, really. I'd always had episodes of depression. I had my first one when I was 15. I had another one when I was 18. And then throughout my 20s, I had several episodes as well. And I always had a lot of anxiety with that as well. And towards the end of my career, I was really struggling because I've got 2 children and they both have additional needs as well. And trying to balance their needs and my mental health as well as working was really tricky. And I don't think there was much kind of support through work for what I was going through. I was in a job that I really loved with the crisis team. And I could have done that job forever, except it was full time and it was really kind of full on, a very stressful job. And trying to cope with that. And my son had started secondary school at the same time and was starting to really struggle. And I'd requested to go part-time, but they couldn't find me a part-time job within the crisis team. And I ended up doing a job for a mental health team that was kind of out in the community. And I was really isolated there and didn't really get much support. And I think by the end of that job, I was so burnt out. I just thought, I can't carry on doing this. I can't carry on working for the NHS. I've got to prioritise my own mental health within that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you've said that because when we think of burnout from work, we don't tend to factor in other influences. So I know myself with having a child with special needs, it's that on its own creates a lot of stress. And we need to look at ourselves as we're not just our job, we're holistic beings. And you mentioned there that the social isolation seemed to be a catalyst there as well.
Yeah, it was kind of looking back on my time in psychiatry. I've worked for lots of different teams, but the jobs that I'd loved the most were always jobs when I worked in a bigger team where the risks were kind of shared out and there were people to bounce ideas off. I didn't like the jobs where I'm just stuck in an office on my own.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. When you decided to leave the NHS, did you have any idea about what you were going to do when you left?
No, I didn't really. Like I say, I think at the time I was just so burnt out. I just knew I needed to get away from there. And I explored a lot of different options about what I could do. Initially, I was thinking about childminding because we'd had problems accessing childminders with having children with additional needs. So I thought that was something that I could offer people. But then one thing led to another and we ended up fostering. and we were foster carers for about 4 years. And it was during that time, seeing how my kids were struggling and seeing how the foster kids were struggling with school, and schools not really understanding their mental health. I started to think, well, I've got all this training in mental health. What can I do to help schools to understand these mental health needs that the kids have? And so I started doing mental health first aid training for schools. And then I kind of branched from that into training businesses. But as a Christian as well, I always felt that the church didn't respond very well to mental health issues either. So now I've set up my own business training churches and Christian organisations in mental health.
Right. That's really good. And the school thing is a massive problem that needs addressing when it comes to mental health. It's really good. It seems like you've noticed that there's a gap in people's knowledge, and you've gone, I can help, and moved in there and help. And
at the end of the day, I love talking about mental health, and if I can get paid to do it as well, that's a bonus for me.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So it's my subject of knowledge as well, and I could talk about it all day.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel that your experience as a psychiatrist has helped you to develop more understanding of your own mental health, or do you feel they both kind of influenced each other?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because obviously I learned everything about mental health through being a psychiatrist, but I think there was so many holes in that as well, that the current understanding in psychiatry and the sort of medicalised viewpoint of mental health doesn't capture the whole of it.
Yeah.
So it was amazing when I started doing the training to deliver mental health first aid, the things that I picked up from that. And I thought, why haven't I realised this as a psychiatrist? Kind of much more holistic view of mental health and how stress affects it and how you can, different coping mechanisms and things like that. And again, that was something that I learned through the fostering as well, because when you are fostering kids that have come from trauma, they come with a whole host of issues. And the way that you parent a child that's been through trauma is very different from the way that you parent your birth children. And so we had to learn this whole new way of parenting. Yeah. And so we had all these books on therapeutic parenting. And the thing that struck me was the first chapter in all of those books was about self-care.
Yeah.
And I realised that as a psychiatrist, nobody had really talked to me about self-care. And I think this is where I'm in a much better place now than I was then, because I had to sort out my own self-care and look after myself so that I could be there to look after kids that were unregulated in themselves. So yeah, I feel like my understanding of my own mental health was actually quite bad, given the fact that I was a trained psychiatrist.
Yeah, and I think that's a big problem when you work in mental health for the NHS. There is no emphasis on self-care, and I think, even across the health service, it's important for practitioners to promote their own self-care, but in mental health in particular, because the things that you're hearing, and it all builds up, and you can very easily get compassion fatigue.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, what's your thoughts on maybe when doctors are training, when nurses are training, that there is that emphasis on self-care?
Yeah, I think things are a lot better now than they were 20 years ago when I was training. Back then, it was still this kind of old boys network, really, of coping. No one really talked about how hard it was, some of the things that we were doing. And some of the things that we were seeing, even as teenagers, training in to be doctors, we were seeing death and suffering, when we were 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And the only resources given us to cope with that was drinking down at the clubs union, and so a lot of my colleagues ended up using a lot of alcohol to cope with their issues, and I think there's still some of that around, but I think medical schools have moved on from there and have started to kind of think more about how they support the mental health of young doctors. But yeah, it is weird, really, that you've got this group of high achieving, perfectionist, sort of maybe slightly neurotic people, and you put them under all this pressure and throw horrible things at them and don't give them anything to cope with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
And I think being a doctor is very hard. And there's still quite little in the way of support for doctors' mental health and very poor understanding of it. I think whether it's the stigma that comes from the profession itself or whether it's a self-stigma that, you don't want to be a patient, you're the doctor, you're there to fix it. You're not the person to be fixed.
Yeah, I think there is an element of that because I found working in mental health that there was this pressure that I can't be struggling. I'm the one that helps people with the mental health.
Yeah.
Okay. So if any of the listeners out there are struggling at the moment, have you got any advice or words of hope for them?
Yeah. Well, I think self-care is an important place to start. And I think it's funny because if I'd said that to myself years ago, I probably would have just laughed and brushed it off. There was a meme that came out a few years back about that big ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you remember this. So there was this big, massive transport container stuck in the Suez Canal. And there was a photo of it with a little digger that was trying to dig away at the bank where it was stuck.
Yeah.
And the little digger looked really insignificant next to this massive ship. And there was a couple of little tugboats as well. And so these things that were around the ship just looked so small and insignificant.
Yeah.
And the meme that I saw, the big ship was labelled My Anxiety. And the little digger was labelled mindfulness. And I laughed at it when I first saw it because that's what it feels like, that you've got this huge amount of stress and burden on your shoulders and people are telling you to, go for a walk or listen to some music or do some mindfulness or, all these small things. And you kind of think, well, that's not going to make any difference. But I think for me, the story of that ship was that after about 3 weeks, the little diggers that were working, there was a couple on one side, a couple on the other side, and the little tugboats that were there, and all of those little things together over a period of time did actually move that ship. That is the analogy for my mental illness, in that I had depression and, doing a bit of mindfulness or going for a walk wasn't going to cure my depression. But all those little things added up over time to become habits that actually support your mental health, along with all the treatment that you could be getting, did actually move it in the end.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
I'll send you a picture if you like.
Oh, yes, please. And I can put a link to it for the listeners as well to have a look at too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the little things as much as we think that's not going to make a difference. It really, really does.
Yeah,
so thank you for that. That's really valuable advice.
And just making time for yourself as well. I think as a female health worker in particular, with a family of my own, the kids are my responsibility, the house is my responsibility, the job is my responsibility, and all those things add up, and you don't get any time for yourself.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, and you can feel quite selfish taking time for yourself, but it's prioritising that and saying, no, actually, this is something that I need to do. And if that means that the dishes don't get done or, the kids have to wear a jumper that's a bit dirty, then that's fine, Yeah,
absolutely. There's that analogy of you can't pour from an empty cup, and that's true. You can't look after the kids and do your job if you're not looking after yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And ask for help as well. I think I've always been very bad at asking for help.
Yes, yeah, that's a very good point. Ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so if anyone out there wants to find out a little bit more about you and the training that you do, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
I have 2 businesses. So my church mental health is Encourage Mental Health, and that's on a website, encouragementalhealth.org. And my training for businesses and schools is Level Up Mental Health Training, which I can't remember my web address off the top of my head, but we'll post it in the links. Yeah.
Yep, we will. Yep. That was been fantastic to have you here with some really good insights there. And it's always great to hear from a psychiatrist about mental health too. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.